Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a slightly rainy Saturday morning, but I think it's going to stop. I was predicting no rain for the week, and I was about as accurate as your local weatherman. Wishful thinking. It worked most of the week, because originally they predicted rain every day, and it only sprinkled a couple times. But this morning, I'm going to talk about a pretty popular subject. I get asked a lot. Well, a couple things. Well, I haven't done a lot of transmission videos lately because if you look at my playlist, I've done a lot of Turbo 400 content. I have said before, if I had it to do it all over again, I would do it more systematically. But either way, I've tried to at least identify them in the playlist under the Turbo 400 videos. So hopefully you find what you need. If not, I'll occasionally keep making videos because there's always more to talk about. Today's video is about, it's not really a how-to, but how to convert a TH375 to a normal Turbo 400. Well, normal is a relative term. Normal to me is a short output shaft, Turbo 400 sized splined yoke. A TH375 was made for, well, 15 years or more. And its premise, and I believe why it was done, and this is in the truck, it's actually like this, and also some station wagons back in the day. This much is inside your transmission. But it has a, well, they came longer. I mean, some Cadillacs, the output shaft's this big and the tail housing, but as 400s go, I'd say it's at least a medium TH350 size yoke. Sometimes they're flat on the top like this one, kind of weird looking, like a platypus. Some say TH375 right underneath. They're easily identifiable, and this one has a tone ring. If you could ever find the pickup, you could make a, tone ring, electric style speedometer drive. But anyway, I believe the reason these were made were for station wagons and pickups, specifically long bed pickups. And in the case of the 88 and up style SS 454 truck, they used one of these. That was a short bed. So this kind of blows my theory, but manufacturers have a maximum length in mind for the drive shaft, a one-piece drive shaft, and it's all calculated on the diameter of the shaft and critical speed. There's lots of science that goes into it, but they have a number that they go by, a standard, and they don't want a one-piece drive shaft longer than that. If you can just make the output shaft and tail housing a little bit longer, perhaps you could use a shaft you already have, or at least use a one-piece shaft. So for whatever reason, GM did it. And in some cases, which is hard to document, the internals of the TH375 may have only had 4 clutches instead of 5 in the forward and direct. They always had 3 in the intermediate that I'm aware of. That's easily changed. In the later years, which this one is, it has the odd style aluminum piston. Let me get you one. So it has this thinner style piston with just a small contact patch to actually push on the first steel. However, it's not a steel at all. It has this cone-shaped spacer that sits right here, and most of the time, like this one, this breaks. It's really thin. You don't see them broken in the forward drum very often because that has a lot less cycles on it. You put it in gear and it stays there. Whereas third, the direct drum comes on in reverse and third, or direct. Often you'll find these broken and then the clutch pack smokes because now you've got a lot of clearance. Some say these pistons are weak. I'm not sure if you compare this to the steel piston, which way you're better off, but if you can get the old traditional aluminum piston installed in your drum, you're probably better off. So from a conversion standpoint, You remove the output shaft, which is pretty much the first piece in the transmission, or the last one you're going to take out, so you got to do some digging. You might as well rebuild the transmission while you're in there, or at least take a good look at it. But it's a simple matter of swapping the output shaft, and of course externally the tail housing, and that part of the transmission is now a TH400. I've gone over the choices of output shafts and modification you could do to them, basically removing the O-ring groove so you don't have yoke interference. So you converted that. You can go through and just count your clutch packs, make your piston choices, and it's really that easy now. The TH375 probably had a really easy life compared to most Turbo 400s because they were in station wagons and half-ton pickups compared to a crew cab dually hauling a 50-foot trailer across the desert. So they probably are, well, let's say they had the country club life as Turbo 400s go. So for me, it seems like yesterday when in 1988, GMC and Chevy trucks went to the round, much better quality fit and fitment body style. And that's where the SS454 truck in that vintage was born, using this style output shaft and tail housing. The 1 tons and 3/4 tons still got a Turbo 400 until 1993, and then there's service Turbo 400s afterwards. But the line in the sand is 1988, when GM, for whatever reason, modified the Turbo 400 with an extra check ball in the case under the valve body or above the valve body. Technically, it's only underneath when it's flipped upside down when you're working on it. But there's a 7th check ball. They were trying to combat harsh reverse engagement, which I never really thought the 400 suffered from, but whatever reason, they went chasing that. So there's a feed restrictor for the rear servo, which you have to remove if you're going to put any, fun parts in. In this case, I have a 1988 TH375. I'm putting an ATD first gear leave billet valve body in it. And it brings up a lot of questions. How do you interchange that with a 7 check ball case? So first, let's run over the transmission, and I'll show you where the restrictor that I remove is. And then we'll talk about the separator plate. Okay, welcome to my messy work area. But look at this beautiful transmission. The aluminum is just like new. It only started to burn the direct clutches because of that broken spacer. So for, as luck would have it, I don't know the history of this transmission. It was pretty clean on the outside as well and painted black, so somebody loved it at some point in time before I got it as a core. So this is a restrictor, this copper looking piece. It's in this hole. This is a feed for the rear servo. You can remove it with a slide hammer, which is what I did. It was in this hole. I just thread my screw into it and slap it out. Or if you want to, you can just take a drill bit and drill it out. The outer shell of the copper will still be there, but you can bore the center hole out so it's not restricting fluid flow. The 7th check ball is that one right there, in between the normal ones. This passage right here is for reverse. And that is the area in question when it comes to valve body gaskets and spacer plate. So let's go back and talk about that. In most all the gasket sets nowadays for a Turbo 400, they include this little piece of paper explaining the difference in the case gasket. The early one has yellow stripes across it, which is really handy. That's the one you want. The later case gasket for the 7th check ball case has an extra teardrop piece right there. My black glove probably doesn't help, but if you compare it to the early case gasket, you'll see the difference. The lower gasket and the valve body is the same. So how do we get this messed up is what we got to be concerned with. The easiest thing to remember, or the way to look at it, is if you pretend or don't even look at the case You don't care if it's a 6 or 7 check ball case. If you're using traditional early 6 check ball separator plate and valve body, in this case I'm putting an ATD first gear leaf trans brake on that 7 check ball case. I don't have to do a thing, I just bolt it on. Other than I remove that restrictor I showed you. It has nothing to do with gasketing, which is what we're talking about now, the plate and gasket interchange. So if you're putting early 6 check ball case valve bodies on your 7 check ball case, just bolt it on, no sweat. The only time you're going to get into questionable interchangeability is if for some reason you were trying to put the 7 check ball separator plate, the stock one, onto a 6 check ball case, and that's a mess. I think it can be done, but why bother? Most all your stuff is 6 check ball. If you have a 7 check ball transmission and you're going to shift kit the stock valve body, just use all the 7 check ball stuff, including the gasket, and do your mods to the valve body and move on. If you want to put a 6 check ball separator plate, use the early gasket and just bolt it on. I hope that makes it easy to remember, but I believe the only time you're going to have problem is if for whatever reason you try to put a 7 check ball separator plate and gasket on a 6 check ball case. Whew. Okay, but it's not that hard. But in my case, get it? I'm just bolting on the ATD billet valve body that fits all Turbo 400s in this case. Another feature I do like about the 87 or 88 and up style TH375 or Turbo 400 is the pump bolts have an O-ring. They're 9/16 hex instead of 1/2 inch. First clue there's something different. They got like a star pattern on them or serrations on the bolt head. And they have the O-ring, which every kit comes with, a set of 8 of them, and you seldom if ever use them. I have piles and piles of them. So when I can, I clean up the stock bolts and put the O-rings back. It's probably a nicer seal, and it saves the gasketed, the black metal gaskets, fiber metal gaskets for the pump bolts that I have to use all the time on the majority of transmissions I do. It's a nice change to be able to reuse the stock bolts with the O-rings. And yeah, that's it. So have a great day. I hope the sun comes out wherever you're at, and I'll talk to you soon.